Kyle Salterian appears in the virtual reality game Fantasy Defense as the youngest son of the prestigious Salterian Marquis family. He was one of the Salterian family members involved in major early game events, but during an encounter with the main character, Kyle is beaten badly and ends up dying pitifully after just one blow from a minion summoned by a villain. This marked him as an extra character, and that extra is now our protagonist. Pinching his cheek hard, Kyle felt a sharp pain, realizing that this was not a dream. He stared at himself in the mirror and, bewildered, shouted, wondering how he had possessed such a worthless character when he was supposed to be Lee Hyun-woo, the top-ranked player in the world of Fantasy Defense. Fantasy Defense is a fantasy-themed defense game that became a huge global hit in 2030. The game is known for its devilishly high difficulty level, and even after 10 years, no one has managed to clear it. Despite this, its addictive nature and challenging mechanics kept it incredibly popular. Players earned points in global rankings based on how they played in completed quests, with rare quests and items significantly boosting their scores. For 10 real-life years, Lee Hyun-woo had been completely immersed in the game, mastering everything from rare magic circles to legendary crafting combinations. With an overwhelming score, he became a living legend as the top-ranked global player. But now, having possessed an extra character, he was left wondering how he could possibly survive in this world when even the protagonist, equipped with the best talents, couldn't clear the game. He vividly remembered Kyle Salterian's fate because he had played the game so many times. The ultimate goal in Fantasy Defense was to stop the forces of darkness, and the one who summoned these dark forces was none other than the second son of the Salterian family, Adel. Seeking to usurp the head of the family, Adel turned to dark powers, instigating a rebellion. In the end, the Salterian territory became a stronghold for the dark forces, who had long coveted the human lands. Amidst the chaos, the powerless Kyle was easily killed. Lying on the bed, Kyle thought he could simply leave the territory before the rebellion started. However, he knew there was a bigger problem. Kyle had a disease known as hermamu. Hermamu is a condition where the mana channels within the body are blocked. In this world, mana is the source of both aura and magic, and it provides essential energy for survival. Those with blocked mana channels, like hermamu patients, cannot absorb the necessary nutrients for life and growth, and most die before they reach 20. Kyle knew that the only cure for hermamu was to absorb nature into the body. However, since his mana channels were blocked, this was impossible. In other words, being diagnosed with hermamu was akin to receiving a death sentence. Diagnosed at a young age, Kyle had fallen into despair, overwhelmed by the fear of death, the anxiety about his remaining time, and the frustration of his inability to fight back. Eventually, he became twisted, and before long, Kyle had turned into a disgrace to the family. In the end, his father, the head of the Salterian family, confined him to an annex. Furious, Kyle shouted that they must think he was a joke for looking down on him. In a fit of rage, he grabbed something nearby and hurled a chair against the wall, yelling for everyone to just die already, making it clear that Kyle was beyond hope. Even in the game, Lee Hyun-woo had seen Kyle as a lost cause. He looked around his room, thinking that Kyle was so rotten that even his terminal illness didn't stir any sympathy. He decided to reassess the situation and found himself puzzled at the man he had possessed. Kyle, the youngest son of the Marquis, but from a doomed family. Kyle had no talent in swordsmanship or magic, no life expectancy, a terrible personality, the worst reputation, and was confined by the head of the family. At that moment, he realized that he was truly doomed. Whether he stayed or ran, he would die, trapped in a no-win situation. In frustration, he shouted, "How am I supposed to survive in this world with such terrible stats? Isn't it normal to get some kind of cheat ability when you're reincarnated, like a status window or something?" Suddenly, a light appeared behind him. When he looked back, he saw glowing circles floating in the air. Confused, he reached out to one of them, wondering what they were since he had never seen anything like this before. As soon as he touched one, it exploded, releasing a bright light, leaving him wondering what was happening. Out of nowhere, a system message appeared, showing that he had awakened. He had been granted 2 new talents, the status window was unlocked, and he could now use insight, which would activate automatically. He was shocked to see the status window appear and excitedly examined it. He noticed that one of the talents he was granted was mana pathways. While he knew the insight talent allowed him to see detailed specs, he had never encountered mana pathways before. Puzzled, he thought that, judging by the name, it must be related to magic. He recalled that the best magic talent was supposed to be Mana Companion, but his intuition told him this was something even more extraordinary. He felt it was a top-tier talent and began to believe that he wouldn't be stopped now. He touched another floating circle, which entered through his hand and goes to his veins. He was shocked, feeling the energy coursing inside him. Suddenly his hands snap, and when he looks at it, he saw the Hermamum blocking the mana pathway. He then commanded the mana to move according to his will. Closing his eyes, he ordered it to pierce through the Hermamum. The mana responded to his will, and when he shaped it into a drill, it followed his command and began piercing the blockage in his body. He continued directing it until it successfully broke through the Hermamum. Excited, he saw that it worked, the mana was flowing. Though it had only reached up to his elbow, he knew that by continuing to gather mana and open the channels, he could overcome Hermamum's barrier. He felt a surge of relief, realizing that he wouldn't die. The next day, in the kitchen, a maid was preparing a dish and felt pleased that she had finished. She picked it up, thinking she should take it to Kyle quickly before it got cold. However, a group of other maids appeared and ordered her not to deliver the meal to Lord Kyle. She stared at them, confused, as they glared back at her. One of the maids, Hi, explained that they had decided to stop serving Kyle for a while as a protest against his behavior. She added that after going hungry for a few days, Kyle might change his attitude. And she instructed the maid to put the dish down. The other maids agreed with her. Despite their orders, the maid calmly responded, to do whatever they want. And she'll do her job. Hai was enraged by her defiance and asked if she thought she was the only one acting all noble. Without warning, Hai slapped the tray out of her hands. And the maid stared in surprise as the food scattered across the floor. Hai, still fuming, demanded to know if the maid still thought she was a noble, mocking her for being sold as a slave. After her family's downfall, the maid stayed silent, quietly picking up the tray from the ground while Hai shouted at her not to be so arrogant. Ignoring the outburst, she continued gathering the dishes, which only made Hai angrier. Hai raised her hand to slap the maid, demanding to know if she was going to keep ignoring them. But fortunately, a man entered the kitchen just in time. He loudly asked what all the commotion was about. The maids were shocked to see him. It was Leonhardt. One of the other maids asked why Leonhardt was in the kitchen. But he ignored the question and noticed the meal on the ground. Realizing it was meant for Kyle, and that the other maids were causing trouble, he told the maid to prepare the meal again and take it to Kyle quickly. Surprised by his order, she replied with a simple yes, while the 2 other maids stood aside. She rushed back to the preparations as Leonhardt quietly observed her. Meanwhile, in Kyle's room, he was examining his talents, insight and mana pathways. He thought that by using these 2 talents, he might be able to change the fate of the fallen Salterian family. Having played fantasy defense for 10 years, he possessed information that almost felt like foresight. On top of that, he was born into a family with great power and wealth like the Salterians. This meant it wasn't impossible to block the forces of darkness. He then made up his mind to take action and decided to focus on 3 main tasks. First, he would clear the mana channels and overcome Hermamum's barrier. Second, he would learn magic, since mana pathways was specialized in magic, it made more sense to become a mage rather than a knight. Second, he needed to prevent the downfall of the Salterian Marquis family. The better the family did, the better off he would be. The Salterian Marquis family was strong in reputation, skill, and wealth, an important shield for him. Since their territory was on the outskirts, he didn't need to worry too much about the capital's politics. Third, and most importantly, he needed to gather talents to prepare for the Dark Force's major assault in the coming years. He would need strong allies. Using his insight talent, he decided to select people with potential and make them his so they could become reliable forces. Confident, he thought that by building strength, he would definitely survive. To gather talent, he should start by looking close by. And since he was in the Salterian Marquis family, Leonhardt would be a good place to start, as he was a useful tank and PC in the game. Just then, there was a knock on his door. A maid entered inside and informed him that she had brought his meal. Surprised, he tried to recall a faint memory of her, wondering what her name was. As he was thinking, the system suddenly popped up, showing that his insight talent had been activated. The system informed him that the target was of a low rank, and a status window appeared in front of him. He realized that with insight, he could now see other people's information. He saw that her name was Ursel, 12 years old, with a talent called Eternal Friend of Spirits. Her traits were listed as cool-headed and diligent, and her affection level was 30. He was shocked to see her talent and focused on it. Eternal Friend of Spirits was a top-tier spirit summoning talent. Without realizing it, he had moved quite close to her and only snapped out of it when she looked at him. She politely told him to enjoy his meal, to which he responded with a simple yes. As she walked away, he wondered how someone with the talent to become a genius spirit summoner was working as a maid in such a place. A year ago, at an auction, the host greeted the audience, promising them something special. An item they wouldn't easily find elsewhere, something they had barely managed to acquire. Kyle was among the audience. The host then presented a girl, introducing her as the third daughter of the fallen Baron Helheim family, Ursel. The audience was surprised, while the host emphasized her well-mannered and smart nature, despite her fallen noble status, and invited them to start bidding. The bidding began at 50 gold, quickly rising to 70, then 90. Next to Kyle was Leonhardt, who urged him to leave, commenting that slave auctions weren't worth their time. However, Kyle raised his hand and made an offer of 300 gold for Ursel, shocking both Leonhardt and the host. The host, wide-eyed, announced the bid, asking if anyone wished to bid higher. Leonhardt, taken aback, asked Kyle if he really intended to buy a slave and what his father would think of it. But Kyle, irritated, shouted at Leonhardt to stop nagging him, saying he could spend his money however he wanted and that his father didn't care about what he did. As the host declared Ursel sold for 300 gold, Kyle rushed to the stage, removing his mask. Leaning closer to her, he told her firmly, "From now on, you belong to me."